My wife lied about being pregnant to keep me from leaving, so I exposed the truth and watched her entire family turn against her. Overnight, I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for the longest time, I thought my marriage with Claire was perfect. Every morning, I'd wake up and see her curled up next to me, hair messy from sleep, a soft smile on her face, and I'd think, this is what happiness feels like. I worked long hours at my job, not because I had to, but because I wanted to provide a life worthy of her. Someone who had always dreamed of a family, of stability, of love that felt like it could withstand anything. And for years, I truly believed we had it. Claire had this way about her, effortless charm, this magnetic attentiveness that made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. She'd run her fingers along my arm while we watched movies on the couch, talk about building a home, or casually drop lines like, "I can't wait until we have our little chaos makers running around someday." I'd laugh and nod, heart swelling with anticipation, already imagining a future filled with birthday parties, late-night baby feedings, and quiet Sunday mornings. Outwardly, we were the picture of perfection. Friends would comment, "You two are couple goals," and family members would beam whenever we walked into a room together. I loved seeing that admiration, thinking it validated the life I had built with Claire. It felt like we were untouchable, like every smile we shared was proof that we had mastered the art of love. But there were moments, small ones when she'd let a shadow slip through, a quiet comment about her fears, a fleeting look of uncertainty when we spoke about our future, lines like, "Sometimes I wonder if we're ready for what's coming." At the time, I brushed them off, telling myself everyone had insecurities. Everyone worried about the next step. So I settled into this bubble of contentment, wrapping myself in the illusion of perfection. I couldn't see it yet, but beneath the surface there were currents of something darker, something that would soon crack the very foundation I thought was unshakable. And I had no idea how fast the storm was approaching. It started with little things that I barely noticed at first. Claire would cancel plans last minute, saying she was exhausted or stressed, and I'd nod, understanding. It was just life catching up to her, I told myself. She began asking me to handle more of the errands, the bills, even small decisions around the house, always accompanied by this subtle, almost imperceptible sigh, like she was carrying some invisible weight. At the time, I thought I was just being helpful, being a good husband. I never stopped to ask why she was suddenly so drained, why her laughter felt just a little forced some nights. One evening, we were sitting at the kitchen table, the lights dimmed, dishes from dinner still scattered around us when she said something that stuck with me. "Sometimes I wonder if you'll still love me when everything gets harder," she murmured, staring at her hands. My chest tightened. I wanted to reassure her, but her voice had this strange edge, like she was testing me, trying to gauge my reaction. I said, "Of course I will, Claire. Always," even though a small knot of doubt had begun to form in my stomach. Her friends and family only reinforced the image I wanted to believe. They would gush about how perfect we were, how rare it was to see a couple so in sync, so happy. I smiled and laughed along, feeling proud, but inside, a tiny voice whispered that something didn't quite add up. She seemed almost too perfect in front of them, almost like she was performing a role. Then came the comments about our future, casual, almost careless, but they lingered in my mind. Lines like, "I just hope we're ready for everything life throws at us," or, "Do you think we're doing enough?" I would laugh, dismissing it as normal preemptive worry, ignoring the subtle unease crawling through me. I went to bed that night, pulling her close, believing we were still perfect. But as I drifted off, I couldn't shake the feeling that a small fracture had formed in our world, invisible but real. I just didn't know it yet, and I had no idea how fast it would widen. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind of quiet Sunday where sunlight filters through the blinds just right, making everything look calm and safe. Claire came into the bedroom, eyes bright, a mixture of excitement and nerves I couldn't quite place. She clutched a small piece of paper in her hand, shaking slightly. I have something to tell you," she said, voice trembling but hopeful. My heart raced, curiosity and anticipation colliding. I sat up, brushing the sleep from my eyes, trying to read her expression. "What is it?" I asked, smiling, thinking maybe she had planned a little surprise for me, something sweet. She handed me the paper. It was a test, a positive pregnancy test. My stomach flipped, a rush of emotions I didn't expect: joy, disbelief, awe. I blinked, staring at the faint lines, feeling tears sting my eyes. "We're going to have a baby?" I whispered, my voice catching. She nodded, her smile wide, radiant. "Yes, I'm pregnant," she said, and I felt my world shift in the most profound way. Friends and family were ecstatic when I told them. The messages flooded in: calls, texts, small gifts, congratulations. Claire beamed with pride, like she had just secured a lifelong trophy. I felt an immense pressure to be the husband she deserved, the father our child would need. I wanted to protect her, to support her, to make this perfect life even more perfect. But there were subtle things that didn't sit right, even in those first moments. She avoided talking about appointments, saying, "I want it to be a surprise until the first scan." I nodded, trusting her, ignoring that tiny whisper in the back of my mind that wondered why she seemed so insistent on secrecy. There were fleeting looks when she thought I wasn't paying attention, hesitations, half-smiles that made me wonder if she was hiding something, but I told myself I was imagining it. I spent that night lying awake, holding her hand, picturing our future, nursery colors, weekend trips, little feet running down the hallway. I felt responsible, protective, and utterly in love. What I didn't know then was that this joyous announcement was the calm before a storm I couldn't yet see coming. At first, it was little things, appointments I had to schedule, errands I suddenly needed to run, dinners I was expected to plan around her mood swings. Claire's pregnancy became a tool, though I didn't realize it yet. She'd casually drop lines like, "You know, I can't handle stress right now," or, "I really need you to." It started with a tiny detail I almost missed. I was going through some old texts, just scrolling mindlessly, trying to catch up on work messages, and I noticed a conversation Claire had with one of her friends about a doctor's visit. The timing didn't add up. She had told me she had a routine checkup that week, but according to the messages, the appointment was canceled. And not just canceled, she hadn't even rescheduled. My heart skipped. I tried to push it away, telling myself it was a small oversight, maybe a miscommunication. But that little seed of doubt had been planted. Then came the little inconsistencies that kept piling up. One evening, I asked her about the prenatal vitamins she was supposed to start. "I ran out, I'll get more tomorrow," she said, avoiding eye contact. Another day, she complained about morning sickness I hadn't noticed her experiencing. The way she described it, almost theatrically, made me hesitate. I questioned myself. Am I imagining this? Am I being paranoid? But the feeling lingered, gnawing at me every time she smiled too brightly or lingered a little too long over a story meant for her friends, not for me. I tried subtle tests, like asking about appointments, doctors' schedules, or what week she was supposed to be in. She'd either dodge or give vague answers, always with that familiar, anxious smile. I remember one evening in the dim glow of the living room lamp, I asked, "Can I come with you to your appointment tomorrow?" She hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "I think I want to go alone this time." "Just to relax," she murmured. My gut twisted. It felt like I was standing on shifting ground. Every reassurance she gave me was now tinged with uncertainty. I loved her, yes, but that tiny spark of suspicion had ignited into a flame. And I realized that this perfect life we had built might be nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. That night, lying in bed beside her, I couldn't sleep. I watched her breathing, even, and wondered if everything I believed about our future was real, or if I was already trapped in something I couldn't yet see. Focus on me today, and I would, every single time. I wanted to be the perfect husband, the supportive partner, the father she needed. So I bent over backward without thinking. I didn't notice the strain quietly building in me, the way my patience thinned like the paper of a balloon stretched too far. Her family adored her, of course. Every update, every story she told, Every little complaint I tried to raise was met with this collective, unspoken defense. She was fragile. She was doing her best. She was sacrificing so much. And I began to feel the pressure to perform too, not just for her, but for them, for the image we had carefully cultivated. There were nights when I'd come home from work, exhausted, and she'd greet me with soft tears and whispered fears about what if the baby changes everything, and my resolve crumbled. I wanted to hold her, reassure her, prove that I could be everything she needed. I started noticing odd inconsistencies. A canceled doctor's appointment with a vague excuse, the way she would dodge questions about tests, or how she seemed more concerned about what her friends and family thought than what we were actually experiencing together. I brushed it off at first, telling myself it was normal stress, normal anxiety. I told myself, it's fine, she's pregnant. She's allowed to be complicated. But late at night, lying in bed, listening to her quiet breathing, I felt a creeping unease. Something about her behavior didn't line up. Every smile, every tender touch felt like a performance, carefully calculated. I loved her. I wanted to trust her. But deep down, an unfamiliar knot of doubt had begun to tighten in my stomach, and I had no idea how deep it would sink. I reached my breaking point one evening, though at the time, I didn't realize how low I had sunk. Claire had been unusually tense all day, snapping at minor things, a misplaced mug, the volume of the TV, even the way I stacked the laundry. I tried to stay calm, to reassure her, but every word seemed to ignite a new flare of frustration. Then she looked at me, eyes glistening with tears, and said, "If you ever leave me, if you can't handle this, I don't know what I'd do. Everyone would hate you. You'd ruin everything." Her words hit me like a freight train. I froze. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in. The air seemed thick, suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, each thump echoing the fear that maybe I was trapped. It wasn't just her words. It was the weight of her family, her friends, the life I had built, all seemingly poised against me if I made the wrong move. I felt isolated, cornered, and completely powerless. I tried reasoning with her, gently, quietly. "Claire, I just want honesty. I want us to trust each other." She shook her head, sobbing. "I am being honest. You just don't understand how much I'm sacrificing for us." Her voice, the tears, the panic, it was overwhelming. My own thoughts started spinning. Was I overreacting? Was I imagining things? Or was I really losing the person I thought I knew? That night, lying awake on the edge of the bed, I felt the crushing weight of hopelessness. I wanted to run, to scream, to escape, but something kept me there. Love? Obligation? Shame? I couldn't tell. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, yet every social tie, every expectation, held me firmly in place. I drifted off, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, thinking that maybe this was my life now. Trapped, manipulated, and utterly alone in a marriage that was supposed to be perfect. But even in that darkness, a small, stubborn spark of determination flickered inside me. I didn't know it yet, but that spark would grow into something I never expected. After that night, I knew I couldn't just sit and feel helpless anymore. I had to know the truth, even if it meant discovering something I didn't want to see. I started quietly keeping track of details, doctor's appointments she claimed to have, her conversations with friends, any inconsistencies that caught my attention. Every text I glanced at, every social media post, every small excuse she gave me was cataloged in my mind like clues to a puzzle I didn't yet understand. Remember the first real surge of adrenaline came when I checked the online portal for the clinic she had supposedly visited. The appointment history didn't match what she had told me. My chest tightened, my hands shook. I felt a mix of dread and relief. Dread because I knew something was off. Relief because now I had something concrete to cling to. Proof that my gut wasn't lying. From there, I became careful, almost surgical in my approach. I asked casual questions about her schedule, subtly tried to confirm appointments, and paid attention to every hesitation, every delayed response. There were nights I stayed up, watching her sleep, listening for patterns, trying to piece together the reality behind her smiles and tears. I even started noticing how she arranged the house. The little gestures aimed to convince me everything was normal. The way the prenatal vitamins were always out, the little snacks she needed, the ultrasound pictures she claimed to have. The tension was suffocating. I wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, but I couldn't. Without proof, I would be the one labeled cruel, paranoid, or selfish. So I waited, silently gathering evidence while pretending everything was fine. And then it happened. A small slip, a single careless comment she made to a friend, that confirmed what I had been suspecting all along. My pulse spiked, my stomach churned. The illusion of the perfect pregnancy was beginning to crumble, and I realized that I was standing at the edge of a revelation. That would change everything, though I had no idea just how explosive it would be. I never forgot the day I finally uncovered the truth. It's burned into my memory like a photograph I can't erase. I had been piecing together her schedule, comparing it with the clinic portal, and cross-referencing messages she thought I'd never see. And then it hit me, plain as day. Every appointment she'd claimed to have, every test, every doctor's visit, none of it existed. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I sat at the kitchen table, the empty cup of coffee in front of me forgotten, staring at my phone in disbelief. She's been lying this entire time. I whispered to myself, my hands shaking. I confronted her that evening, calm but firm, hiding the full scope of my discovery for now. Claire, these appointments, the tests, the ultrasound images, none of it checks out. Can you explain? Her face froze for a split second, the practiced smile faltering. Then she blinked, a flicker of panic crossing her eyes, quickly replaced by her familiar composure. You don't understand, it's complicated. I was trying to protect us. I was scared, she said, voice trembling but controlled. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I could feel every emotion, sharp and raw. Anger, disbelief, sorrow, humiliation. Every sacrifice I had made, every sleepless night worrying about her, every dollar spent preparing for a future we'd planned together, it felt like it had been feeding a lie. My love, my trust, my life, all built on a fantasy she had constructed to control me. I looked at her, really looked for the first time in months, and saw her for who she had been, a manipulator who weaponized my devotion, my loyalty, my very love. The apartment felt smaller, the air thicker as the reality sank in, and then the full scope hit me. She hadn't just lied to me. She had enlisted her family, friends, everyone around us to maintain the illusion. I sat back, stunned and trembling. For the first time, I understood the entire game she had been playing, and I knew, without a doubt, that everything was about to change. The perfect life I thought I had was nothing but a carefully orchestrated lie. After the initial shock wore off, I realized I had a choice. I could let this lie destroy me, or I could take control and make sure the truth finally came out. I began planning carefully, meticulously, like a chess player thinking 10 moves ahead. Every piece of evidence I had gathered, the canceled appointments, the messages, the inconsistencies, needed to be used strategically. I didn't want to just prove her deceit. I wanted to make sure her family and friends saw the reality too, because they had been unwittingly complicit in her manipulation. I spent nights drafting a plan, walking through scenarios in my head. How would she react if confronted directly? What if she tried to gaslight me in front of everyone? I even rehearsed the order in which I'd present proof, making sure the evidence was undeniable. I had learned that confrontation without preparation could backfire, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Every text I saved, every screenshot, every irregularity was like a small weapon in my arsenal. The tension was almost unbearable. Claire seemed to sense something shifting. Her glances were sharper, more calculating. Her usual smiles seemed strained. I remember one evening she asked, "Are you upset about something?" And I smiled lightly, careful not to betray anything. "No, why?" I said, even though inside I was counting the days until the reveal. The apartment felt like a battlefield disguised as a home, every corner charged with silent suspense. I also had to think about timing. It wasn't just about proving her lies, it was about the impact. I wanted her family to see her for who she truly was before she could weave another layer of deceit. I imagined the moment when her carefully constructed world would unravel, and it made my chest tighten with a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. As I lay awake that night, running through every detail, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. The moment of truth was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The stage was set, the pieces were in place, and Claire had no idea that her entire illusion was about to collapse. The day I decided to confront Claire, my hands were shaking, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I had everything organized. The messages, screenshots, the proof that showed her entire pregnancy had been a fabrication. I told her, calmly, "We need to talk. I think it's time your family sees the truth." For the first time in months, her confident composure faltered. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, that practiced smile replaced with something raw and vulnerable. Her family was there, gathered for what they thought was just another Sunday visit. I presented the evidence carefully, piece by piece. The canceled appointments, the texts, the inconsistencies, it all fell into place like a puzzle, undeniable and crystal clear. Claire tried to interject, her voice shaky. "Wait, you don't understand." But the room had shifted. The disbelief on her family's faces turned to shock, and then anger. She stumbled over her words, her attempts to gaslight me failing spectacularly. I remember the moment her mother's eyes filled with tears, but not sympathy for Claire. Rage. Her father's jaw tightened, and even her siblings looked at her like she was a stranger. I could feel the room shift completely, the balance of power flipping in an instant. Every lie she had spun, every manipulation, every tear she had feigned, it was all crumbling around her. And I stayed calm, breathing steadily, letting the truth speak louder than my anger. Claire tried one last desperate move, pleading, begging, but it was too late. The people who had once admired her now looked at her with disgust and disbelief. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief because the truth was finally out. Sorrow for the betrayal I had endured. And in that moment, standing there with her world falling apart, I realized something profound. Control had shifted. The perfect life I had thought I'd lost was gone, but in its place was a raw, undeniable truth. Claire's deception was exposed, and the person she had tried to manipulate so thoroughly had reclaimed his power. The aftermath was surreal. Claire sat in silence, her face pale, her hands trembling as her family confronted her with every lie she had told. I watched from a quiet corner, feeling a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. The people who had once praised her, who had smiled at her charm and believed every story she spun, now looked at her like she was a stranger. Her credibility was gone, shattered by the evidence I had laid bare. Her mother's voice shook with anger as she said, "How could you do this to everyone? To him?" Her father stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes filled with disappointment that words couldn't capture. Even her friends, who had supported her blindly, were now hesitant, unsure what to believe. Claire's world had flipped overnight, and the look on her face was one of pure, unguarded panic. She realized that no amount of pleading, no fabricated tears could undo the damage. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The betrayal had cut deep, but finally it was being recognized, acknowledged, and condemned. Every sleepless night, every pang of doubt, every moment I had questioned myself, it all led to this point. Claire had orchestrated a world where I felt trapped, but the truth had dismantled it completely. There were moments when she tried to speak, to explain, to make excuses, but her words fell flat. The room was no longer hers. The trust she had built with everyone around her was gone. Even small attempts to regain control were met with disbelief and skepticism. I could see her desperation in every twitch, every quiver of her voice, every futile glance around the room for support. As I left that evening, the apartment quiet behind me, I felt the weight of everything finally lift. The storm had passed, and though the scars of deception would remain, so would the knowledge that the truth had prevailed. I was free, not just from her lies, but from the shadow she had cast over my life. And for the first time in months, I could breathe again, unburdened, empowered, and in control. Weeks after the confrontation, life felt strange, lighter somehow, but still tinged with the echo of what had happened. I had space to breathe again, to think, to reclaim the parts of myself I'd lost in the months of deception. The apartment, once a stage for manipulation and tension, became my sanctuary. I could walk through the rooms without flinching at her rehearsed smiles or calculating glances. It was just me and the quiet hum of freedom. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened. I realized how deeply I had invested myself, how my love and trust had been weaponized, and yet I hadn't broken. That realization was powerful. I had endured betrayal so thorough it threatened to collapse everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty, and I had survived. I began rebuilding not just my life, but my confidence, my sense of self, and my boundaries. I started small, picking up hobbies I'd neglected, spending time with friends who had supported me without judgment, and rediscovering the things that made me feel alive outside the shadow of a lie. Her absence became a strange form of relief. I didn't gloat, didn't seek revenge beyond exposing the truth, but I watched the ripple of consequences unfold in her life and felt a quiet sense of justice. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about balance. I had been manipulated, yes, but I had taken control, reclaimed my power, and faced the storm head-on. The most surprising thing was the peace that came afterward. No longer entangled in her web, I could finally envision the future I wanted, one rooted in honesty, trust, and authenticity. I didn't have to constantly question, second-guess, or tiptoe around deception. And in the quiet moments, I felt a deep, unwavering clarity. I was free, whole, and stronger than ever. The betrayal had left its mark, but it also revealed my resilience. I had survived the lies, exposed the truth, and reclaimed my life. And that, more than anything, felt like victory.